Hi guys, welcome to this video. If you clicked on this video, you probably have endometriosis or have like a gut-wrenching suspicion that you have endometriosis. And that's why I'm making this video. I just want to open up about my journey with endometriosis, where I'm at right now, and how it's affected my life. And I just want to say, if you have endometriosis, I'm so sorry. Like, it's hard, and sometimes it feels like you can't ever see the light at the end of the tunnel. Honestly, I don't know what to say, but I just want to share what I'm feeling so that maybe you guys can relate to me on that level. So if you're new here, welcome to my channel. If you are already subscribed, welcome back. Okay. First, what I want to do is I want to just read the definition of endometriosis. So the definition is: endometriosis is often a painful disorder in which tissue that normally lines the inside of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. It most commonly involves your ovaries, your fallopian tubes, the lining of your pelvis, and rarely endometrial tissues may spread beyond your reproductive organs. That's in really rare cases. Like, I know a girl who has it in her liver. It goes up on, it's just bad. So then I'm going to read you the symptoms, and everyone's symptoms vary. But just the ones listed here are painful periods, pain with intercourse, pains with bowel movements or urination, excessive bleeding, infertility, and of course other symptoms are listed that are just a drop down. So I just want to give my backstory of endometriosis. I was diagnosed with endometriosis at 17 years old. Prior to that, I didn't really have any issues with my period. I think I started my period when I was 13. It was fine. I don't know, as much as you can remember when you're 13 years old, how your period is. But when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and I just remember when I got my period, it was awful. Like, it was awful. I couldn't move. It was like debilitating. And I remember telling my mom, like, that I don't know what to do. Like, I'm throwing up. This is awful. It was the worst pain I ever had felt in my entire life. And so she took me to her OBGYN because my mom actually had endometriosis and was like, hey, maybe this is, maybe it's not, but these are her current symptoms. Not knowing that way later on I'd get even worse symptoms. And so what they did was they did an ultrasound, and at first they can't find anything with an ultrasound. So they said, yeah, well, maybe she has it, maybe she doesn't, but we don't want to do a laparoscopy because she's so young, and if it's not endometriosis, and since these symptoms are just starting, let's just push that aside. And so they did the ultrasound, found nothing, but they're like, sure, maybe, but you can't really diagnose without a laparoscopy. So then, fast forward, I turned 18 and I had just graduated high school, and I remember every time my period came, I would end up in the hospital. Like, I would be peeled over, my stomach hurt, my back hurt, and I was throwing up. Like, that was one of the major things, is that I just threw up constantly and constantly. And I was pretty thin anyway, and so I was losing all this weight because I was throwing up. And it wasn't just at this point when my period was. All the pain started coming when I started ovulating. And the thing with endometriosis is your period's never on time, or it's irregular. But I always knew when I was on my period, obviously, because I'm bleeding this ungodly amount because I have endometriosis. And then when I knew I was ovulating, because I'd have this huge pain again in my stomach, and it was just awful. And I remember being 18 years old and wondering, like, what is wrong with me? Like, why am I in the hospital? Like, it's not normal for an 18-year-old to be in the hospital every time she gets her period. And of course, like, the doctors that are in the hospital aren't OBGYNs. They're not familiar with endometriosis. They don't know what it is. Every time I would get my discharge paper, they would just say, oh, well, it's period pains, here's some ibuprofen. Or sometimes they'd be like, oh, it's period pains, like, just go get some ibuprofen from the store. And if you have endometriosis, you know that ibuprofen 200 or 600 or even 800 does absolutely nothing for you. It does nothing. So taking that is like, it's a waste of time. And I remember I'd throw up, so they'd give me Zofran. I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not nauseous for like 2 seconds, but my stomach still hurts. Like, and it wouldn't be like a hurt where like you ate something wrong. It's like, I've had a baby, so the closest thing that I can relate the pains to is having a contraction times 50 for hours. It's not just when you're pregnant, you have a contraction every 1 to 2 minutes for 1 minute long, whatever, when you're close to having a baby. It's like that times a million forever. It is the worst feeling ever. So, anyway, digress. I remember being at 18, I got my dream job. Well, actually, I created my dream job. I became the first competitive cheer coach for the town I lived in because it was really small and we just didn't have resources available. And I built this program from the ground up. I spent months and months on a proposal for the town just to show them, like, hey, this is something we need. We have a very competitive high school cheer program. Like, this would be really good for the community. And so they allowed me to do it. It was really, really awesome. We had tryouts, we had dances, we had music, we went to tumbling. Like, it was just the coolest thing I'd ever been a part of. And I remember at that time I had just got my job working for Pinal County Sheriff's Office, and things were kind of getting worse with my endometriosis. I remember this very specific time I was in what they call master control, and I was in there with 2 other coworkers, and I just, all of a sudden out of nowhere, just a huge swarm of pain came over me. And I remember I was like, guys, I can't work. And when you work there, you're just on a computer, you're not doing a lot. But I could not even physically get up the energy or to use a computer or to stare at these screens. And I remember I was laying on the floor of master control, and one of my supervisors came in and like, hey, you should go to the hospital. Hi. And I remember I laid there for probably another 30 to 40 minutes before I finally could get the courage, the energy, just anything to get off the floor and take myself to the hospital. And I remember going that time to the hospital, and they had to give me morphine because by the time I got there, I literally was almost crawling into the hospital from pain. I never felt anything like this. And this pain lasted the whole week of my period. They discharged me from the hospital. I went to my friend's house, and I stayed there for a week, just on drugs. Not like, I mean, they're prescribed to me. Obviously, I'm not like a drug addict. But I was there for a week, highly medicated, because the second that any of the pain medication wore off, I felt like I was dying again. And this is where I knew like something was really, really wrong. And I remember that week I had to call in to cheer practice. I couldn't coach these kids. And the more I thought about it and the more I thought about it, I just knew that something wasn't right with my body. And if this was happening twice a month, because remember, keep in mind, this is happening during my period and this is happening during ovulation. And I just thought, if the pain is going to be like this every time, because it kept getting worse and worse, I can't dedicate myself to this cheer program. And it broke my heart, because after putting so much time into it, I just knew that I couldn't give it my all. And it was the only thing I wanted to do in life was coach, and I could not do it. My body I was at 19 by this time. My body at 19 physically could not keep up with physical activity, and to take 2 weeks off during a 4-week month, it wasn't possible. So then, because this happened, I think this was a time in my life where I realized this isn't fun. It's ruining my life. And so it kind of sent me in a downward spiral. I literally was miserable, because there's 4 weeks in a month, and 2 weeks out of it I was miserable, and in between I had anxiety of, when is this going to happen? Why is this happening to me? And when you start to think like, why does my body not work at 19? It really puts you in a dark place, because at 19, you should be able to do anything that you want, and to not be able to have that time and the ability to do what you want really makes you think like so, for lack of better words, shitty of yourself. You're like, why can't I do this? And then you start to get depressed and you start to get anxious, and you're like, this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And don't get me wrong, I know people go through much worse, but when you're young and you can't do the things that other people your age are doing, you feel awful. You feel so awful, and it is not fun. And so this just kept happening for years. For years, I suffered from bad menstrual cramps. I suffered from bad ovulation pain. It got to the point where my endometrial tissue was pressing on my uterus that hits your bowels, and as disgusting as that is, I couldn't, and I still can't. It's still very hard to go to the bathroom because it's just pressing up against that, and to go to the bathroom hurts. And so I rarely go to the bathroom unless I absolutely have to, because it is the worst experience to try and go to the number two like a normal human being. And I don't know, it's just a part of having endometriosis. I want to fast forward to when I was 22. Me and my boyfriend at the time decided that we wanted to have a baby, and I knew that with endometriosis it was going to be a hard thing to try and have a baby. They warn you about that when you have endometriosis, that it causes infertility, you may not get pregnant. And I told my boyfriend this. I said, my now husband, I said, Mike, like, I don't know if I can have a baby. If I can, I don't know how long it's going to take. Like, this is just something that may be an issue, but I want to try anyway, so let's try. And by some miracle, I ended up having my daughter Aurora, and it was the best thing ever. The first time and the only time we tried, I got pregnant, and there was no explanation for it. Mike, even when we went to the doctor for the first time to like confirm the pregnancy, and they said, yeah, you're pregnant, there's the blood test, yay, fireworks. Mike, my husband, because I had explicitly told him that, like, I don't know how this works, I don't know how it's possible. He asked the doctor, he said, I thought that she couldn't have kids, or I thought that it was going to be hard, like, how did we end up with a kid the first time we tried? And I was like, Mike, like, you don't believe me? And he's like, no, I believe you, but like the way you explained it just did not seem possible. And the doctor really had no explanation for him. He said, you know what? Sometimes you get pregnant, sometimes you don't. I don't have an explanation for it either. And it was really great. Like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I worried so much that I couldn't have a baby. And I got to have her. And so during my pregnancy, of course, when you have endometriosis, your symptoms go away when you're pregnant, because what happens is mostly your symptoms come when your endometrium tissue needs to shed when you have your period. So that's basically what happened. This tissue builds up, and then when you have your period, it all flushes out. When you have endometriosis, your period doesn't flush it out, and it starts building and building these lesions, and that's what gives you that pain, is from those lesions and the scarring and everything that goes with that. So when you're pregnant, you don't have symptoms. So I was like, yay, I'm not going to be in pain anymore. That was a lie. I had hyperemesis gravidarum. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to go into it. But my pregnancy was awful. But I was really thankful that I was able to just be pregnant. And then, of course, they say after you're pregnant, symptoms may or may not come back. So for 2 years, up until almost half a year ago, I had no endometriosis symptoms. I didn't have a period for the first year after I had my daughter, because I exclusively breastfed her. And then around 1 year, she kind of slowed down, but she was still majority breastfed. You can check my I'm breastfeeding a toddler video. I'll link it at the end of this video, and I'll link it down below. But I didn't have any symptoms. And so I thought, like, oh, I'm done. Like, I don't have endometriosis anymore. This is great. And then a little after 2 years, I stopped breastfeeding my daughter. And that's when my symptoms came back, and they came back hard. They came back stronger than they ever had. I just was throwing up all the time. It was uncomfortable to go to the bathroom, and my periods weren't that bad. It was my ovulation pain. There was times where I would be standing and I would peel over, or I would run into a wall, or I would just lose all my dexterity because this pain came and then it stayed. And when a pain hits you that hard and that fast, you lose your footing. And that started to happen again. And I knew that my endometriosis was back. I knew that there was no escaping it. I thought that was the end of it, and it wasn't. So I went to my doctor, and he said, you know what, let's make a plan of action. Okay, so I went to my doctor, and he said, let's make a plan of action. And so I went. The first step was to go see the ultrasound tech. And when I went to get my ultrasound, she asked me questions. They're not doctors, so they don't really say too much, but she said, what are you here for? And I said, oh, I'm just here for an exploratory ultrasound for my endometriosis. We're just gonna check it out right now. At this point, we don't know anything for sure. So she said, okay, and she went on to do the ultrasound. And I just remember laying there, and I was like, God, like, why? And one of the first things she said to me was, wow, something's really wrong down there. And it takes a lot for an ultrasound tech to say that. And most of the time, you cannot see endometriosis through an ultrasound. It's very rare that you can. And of course, she didn't say it's endometriosis. She just said there's something really wrong down there. And what do you say to that? You're just like, gee, thanks. I know. And it's nothing against her. It's just like, it kind of really sucks when you know you have endometriosis, and a lot of the times doctor, when they're telling you, oh, you're going to get the ultrasound, it's not a big deal. They won't see anything, and then they do. You're just like, wow, thanks, fun. So then I had a follow-up appointment with my doctor where he said, you know what, we're going to do the laparoscopy. And basically, if you don't know what a laparoscopy is, basically they take two little prongs, they put one in your belly button, and they put one on the side of your stomach, and one is a tool that does like an ablation or whatever the other thing is called, that basically will take off the lesions off of your endometriosis. And then the other is a scope so that they can see what they're doing. So we scheduled the laparoscopy, and when he went in there, there was no active lesions, but there was lesions that had been there that were healing. So there was no new active lesions, but he said that you could tell that at one point it was really bad and that it's just starting to heal itself. But it happens, it'll heal, it'll come away, it'll heal, it'll come away. And so he also found, hold on, I need to look up what it's exactly called. He found like a very small hole in my uterus, and the way that my husband put it, because my husband got to see the pictures when I was still under the anesthetic, my husband says I have a cigarette hole in my uterus, but I'm going to figure out the exact name of it for you. Okay, it's called a perforated uterus, and basically it's just a small hole in your uterine lining that happens. It can happen from a lot of things. It can happen from your endometriosis. It can happen from pregnancy. It can happen if there's a rupture during your pregnancy. There's just a lot of things you can't really pinpoint what it is. So I had that as well. So I had the endometriosis, I had the perforated uterus, and then I also have PCOS, but I had no cysts at this time. So that was a good thing, right? Like lots of other things that were wrong, but I didn't have any cysts. So basically after that, he said, you know what, this is the plan of action. You can either try and get pregnant, because most people have success getting pregnant right after their laparoscopy, or what we can do is we can go on Lupron. And if you don't know what Lupron is, basically Lupron is a drug that they give you that physically puts you into menopause. It makes you go into menopause so that you can get rid of all your symptoms and hormones that cause you to have a period. So basically what that does is it's like a kickstart to restart. So that way you're tricking your uterus into thinking, oh, I don't have a period, I don't need to produce these hormones, I don't need to bleed, I don't need to do this. But of course, there's also horrible side effects that come with Lupron, and everybody told me that. So ultimately what we decided was we were going to try and have another baby. And I can say at this point, we have been unsuccessful. And I had my surgery in February, March, April, May, June. So we're going on 5 months and I am not pregnant. And every time that you look at a pregnancy test that says not pregnant, your heart breaks. Because there's nothing more that I want than for my daughter to have a sibling. And so every time, because of this disease, that you see a not pregnant, it gets harder and harder the more time that goes on, because it sends me back to being 19 again and wondering what is wrong with me. Like, why I'm a healthy 25-year-old now. Why isn't my body doing what it's supposed to? And it sends me back to being 19 and an insecure 19-year-old who was like, why am I going through this pain? Why can't I have my dream job? Like, why is this dream being stripped away from me? So the same thing happens now at 25. Like, why can't my body do what it's supposed to? For the most part, I'm a healthy 25-year-old. I'm a healthy weight. I'm a healthy height. My BMI is fine. I don't eat great, but I also don't eat the worst. And so that's the hard side of endometriosis. And I'm so happy and I'm super lucky that I was able to have my daughter the first time around when we decided to have a baby, that by some miracle we had her. And I'm so lucky and I'm so thankful. But now, like, trying to have a second kid, it's just, it's hard. This is the side of endometriosis that I didn't know. And this side is 20 times worse than all the pain. Wanting a baby is I don't know. I'm so maternal. I do everything for my daughter. I love my daughter. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. And I always knew that I wanted my daughter to have a sibling because I love my little brothers. I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do in life without them. And so the thought and the possibility of my daughter not getting to experience that breaks my heart. And so that's just what having endometriosis is. And, you know, things happen for a reason. And I used to constantly ask myself, like, why do I have this? Why is this happening to me? And now I'm just barely starting to understand that that's just the way life is. Some people have illnesses and diseases, and that's the thing with endometriosis, is there's no cure for it. There is no cure for endometriosis. They don't know how people get it, they don't know why people get it, and they don't know how to make it go away. The only option is to physically have all your reproductive organs taken out. And I'm 25. I still want another kid. I don't want that. So I'm still going to put myself through the pain of getting these negative pregnancy tests over and over and over again, because and dealing with that pain, because I don't want to go down that road. I want to be able to have a successful and a viable pregnancy so that my daughter can have a sibling. But like I said, that's just endometriosis. And I guess I guess on that note, I hate to end on like such a negative note, but this is a negative video. Most people that have endometriosis understand what it's like, and they know the symptoms, and they know that it causes infertility. But yeah, I guess I'm just going to end on that note. I want to say thank you if you've stuck by this video for that long, and you've listened to me ramble and digress and all my symptoms and all that. Thanks. My heart goes out to you. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of links down below to resources for those of you that have endometriosis. And I'm going to link my personal doctor because I think the world of my doctor. I think that he's so great. So if you're in the Pinal County area, please go check him out. He will help you. He will be a great resource for you. He will be someone that's always on your side. And I really want everyone that has endometriosis to be able to experience it in a positive way from the medical side of it. Like, know that you always have a partner that is going to help you medically. So with that being said, thank you guys again so much for watching this video. You can check out all my other videos. I do vlogs with my daughter, my friends, my husband. And I'll see you guys next time.